when we're setting up for the bench, a kind of common misconception, and I know I'm probably going to catch some flack for this, is that you must be maximally retracted. But there's a problem with that statement. What's up, ladies and gents? Welcome back to the YouTube channel. Today's video, Noah will name it because he's way more creative than I am, but something like the powerlifter's guide to happy shoulders or something like that. So what kind of spurred today's video is the fact that pressing always seems to beat up people's shoulders, right? But never pulling. Why do we not get shoulder injuries from pulling, right? It's the same thing done in reverse. So why do we get injured or pain, discomfort, like doing that, but almost never doing that? And the reality is that it's probably down to how we're setting the shoulders. Now, as with everything, everything's multifaceted. It's never quite that simple, right? But I think a large part of it is down to how we're setting the shoulder and how we're asking it to behave during these pressing movements. So what I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to specifically talk about in relation to the bench press, because it's the most important one, right? At least for most of us. But in reality, we can kind of apply it to just about every other pressing movement, because what we're really talking about is how do we structure the shoulder with relation to the torso so that when the arm forcefully extends away from the body, it is in a stable environment to do so, and the correct muscles can do the correct things at the correct time, and so on and so forth, right? So to learn how to create this stable environment for the shoulder, we need to learn about the muscles that are responsible for it. Now, this is a terrible drawing, so I apologize, right? At one point in my life, I wanted to be a graphic designer, and I was quite good, but you would never be able to tell that now, right? So most of us know the lat, okay? And most of us emphasize these very heavily when we press, right? Because we deem them very important, and that's not wrong, right? But what we forget is that they have kind of a counterpart on the front side of the body, right? So the lat lives here on the posterior rib cage, and we can see that. And again, some of these statements I'm going to make are not anatomically accurate, I suppose. But what matters is you understand the mechanism I'm talking about and then can do something to improve it or execute, right? So just bear that in mind. And what we can see the lat as is a muscle that can anchor the posterior side of the shoulder to the posterior rib cage. So it kind of sews this bit together, okay? And you can kind of feel that. Like if you stand and rotate the back of your shoulders down into your body, like a lot of us will be doing on a bench press, you can feel the lats tension. So the lats have two primary roles. They can do that posterior anchoring of the rib cage in the shoulder, and they also pull the upper arm down towards the midline of the body, which is why they're also used during rows in the eccentric phase of a bench press, right? Because the elbow and upper arm relative to the body travel down this way, right? So lats pull the shoulder and rib cage down that way, but they also pull the arm in this kind of arc movement here, okay? I did warn you this would be a terrible diagram, okay? Then, however, we have its counterpart that lives on the front side of the body, which is the serratus, which is the one that we all kind of know exists. We don't really know what it does, and we assume it's not important. That's part of the problem. So we have serratus that lives here. Okay? Now, what we can see serratus as is kind of the opposite here. So it anchors the anterior rib cage down. Or think about it as pulling the front of the shoulder down onto the front of the rib cage, right? And this is why, for example, if you want to feel this working in real time, which is cool, right? You can do a double lat spread, or whatever it would be called, the bodybuilding pose, which I'm absolutely not going to demonstrate on camera right now, right? But you get in that position where your shoulders are rounded forward, and then you kind of lock the shoulders down. And if you do that, it becomes, if you do it well, it is physically impossible to arch your chest up. And the reason for that is you're putting your shoulders in a position where serratus has really good leverage, could drag the shoulder down onto your rib cage. And because it's doing that very, very strongly, it becomes impossible to do that, because the shoulder and the rib cage on the front side of the body are just super glued together, okay? So we have serratus on the front side of the shoulder anchoring things down, and we have the lat on the back side anchoring things down there, okay? Now, how these two muscles can work or how well they can work is largely determined by where your shoulder is relative to your ribs, okay? So if we take this as the clavicle or your collarbone, we can kind of use that to imagine where the shoulder is relative to the rib cage, okay? Excuse me. So when we go very heavily retracted, which some of you may be on the bench press, I'm not going to say that's right or wrong, when we put the shoulder girdle back here, right? What happens is we put the shoulder back over the lat, and then the lat has great leverage, right? So when the shoulder is back here, the lat does a great job of anchoring the shoulder down and can create a lot of tension to do that. Then if we go forward into protraction, the serratus gains traction over the shoulder girdle and can anchor that anterior side down extremely well. Okay, and I'm going to show you a drill where you can kind of play with this, but that's why we see on that lat spread pose, the ability to lock the shoulder down on that front side goes up, and then you can't do anything to arch your chest up, okay? So now, when most of us are thinking about the bench press, you're going to have different approaches, I'm sure, but most of us will probably agree that we want the shoulders depressed. Okay, so we need them down. Now, both of these muscles are capable of pulling the shoulders down, doing like a reverse shrug, right? You know, if this is a shrug, that would be a reverse shrug. There's probably a more fancy name, right? But we're just going to go with reverse shrug for now. So both of these muscles can do that. And which one is doing more of the work in that regard is going to be dependent on where we are in relation to here. Now, when we're setting up for the bench, a kind of common misconception, and I know I'm probably going to catch some flack for this, is that you must be maximally retracted. But there's a problem with that statement. And the problem with it is that it's contextual. And what I mean by that is how much you're able to retract is going to depend on where your shoulders are in terms of elevation and depression. So what I mean by that is if I'm here now and I depress, so I do that reverse shrug as hard as I can, I get my shoulders as low into my body as possible. If I set that first and then retract as hard as I can, that's as far back as I can go. That is maximal retraction in that environment. It's not very far. Okay, so let me come back. And now I go, and not that we would ever bench like this, right? But to make the point, I go full elevation, like high as I can get my shoulders, right? Now I go maximal retraction. I can get back really far. So how much you're able to retract and go back this way is going to be determined by how high up or down your shoulders are, right? So if you're someone who retracts first and then pulls down, you're probably going to be limited in terms of how far down you can get your shoulder. Likewise, if we go down first and then back, they won't go down, they won't go back as far. But is that necessarily a problem? Now, if we want the shoulder to be very stable, we want these muscles to be able to do their job of anchoring the shoulder down. And if we go ahead and retract first and get way back here and then pull down, we can't fully depress the shoulder. We can't do that reverse shrugging movement. And because of that, these muscles, the lats and the serratus, are unable to anchor the shoulder joint properly. Okay? So then we're kind of, not say destined for failure, but we can't get the shoulder joint as stable as we would like it to be. Okay? Now, the other problem with being over retracted, okay, so jammed right back here from the get-go. First off, we have no serratus, so there's nothing anchoring the shoulder on the front side of the body, which can be a problem. The other issue is that if you think, okay, so you'll commonly hear a cue, things like reach for the bar with your chest should rise to meet the bar. We're all talking about the same thing, right? That during the eccentric phase of a bench press, the sternum should come up in some way. But how does that happen? It's not like you suddenly, as you're coming down, you magically gain the ability to arch or your rib cage grows, right? What's actually happening is, or should happen, as the arms come towards the midline of the body, as in the upper arm to the midline of the body, the shoulders naturally need to retract a little bit to allow the humerus and the shoulder joint to kind of stay in the correct relationship with each other. But now if you imagine if I'm lay on a bench and I'm here and my shoulders creep back and together a little bit, all that musculature in the back is going to come back and together, which obviously is going to prop you up slightly higher. So the problem we're going to have is if we are jammed back in maximal retraction at the start, I can't create that little bit of backwards glide in the shoulder that allows me to A, keep the upper arm where I want it in the shoulder joint, and I can't get that rising of the chest. So what we want is we want to start in a position where we're more central, not way back here, but more central, so that as we perform the eccentric phase of the bench, which, you know, is basically a seated row for all intents and purposes, the shoulders have at least a little bit of room to retract and come back so that the arm can glide in the manner that it's kind of accustomed to so that we can maintain control. Perfect. Okay, so how should we be setting up the shoulders for a press or specifically the bench press? Well, we want to aim for maximal depression, because that again means lat and or serratus, and we'll talk about which one should do more work in a moment, can anchor the shoulder down onto the rib cage, which is going to keep it nice and stable. And then for all intents and purposes, let's say wide as possible. Because when we say wide as possible, you know, imagine the collarbones there as broad as humanly possible. Like, so if I went into protraction, I would get narrower. If I went too far into retraction, I would also get narrower. There's this sweet spot in the middle where you're going to be as wide as humanly possible, and the shoulder joint is going to be pretty much centrated there over the rib cage, over serratus and lat, which we want. Okay. Now, why would we not just jam right back into retraction and just have the lat do everything? It's a good question. Now, as we said, the lat can do two things. It can anchor and it can pull the arm, right? If a muscle has more than one function, it's probably safe to assume it's not good at doing them both maximally at the same time, right? So if we're in this massive amount of retraction back here and the serratus can't help anchor the shoulder, well then all of that onus in terms of stability and depression lands on the lat. So now we're asking the lat to not only row the bar down in the bench press, which is what we should be doing, we're also asking it to maximally anchor the shoulder joint. And what happens is it ends up doing neither of them very well, right? Whereas when we're more centered here, we can pass off some of that onus on the shoulder stability to the serratus, which means the lat then is essentially freed up to act more like a pulling muscle on the eccentric phase of the bench press and create a more of a row-like mechanism, okay? Now, that's all wonderful and nerd talk, and I know some of you are going to have switched off by now, which is fine, okay? But for me, this was important to lay out. What I want to do next is show you one or two drills that you can do to get a feel for what this is talking about, right? Because this little serratus muscle here, like most of you have probably never felt it, never heard of it, don't know what it does, etc., and that's fine. What we want to do is create an environment where you can feel what happens when it's doing its job properly and be like, oh, actually this feels kind of nice, like everything can glide as it needs to. So that's what we're going to do next. This is a drill that's going to help teach you how to keep the shoulders down where we want them during your bench press or any press, but also teach you the difference between how it feels to be depressed and maximally retracted, and neutral and protracted. And hopefully you're going to feel like there's going to be a sweet spot for you where your shoulders don't feel all jammed up, you don't feel excessive pressure on the pecs and the pressing muscles, and you feels like you have the most freedom to move the shoulder joint. Okay, so for this drill, which is essentially a regression of a scapular pull-up. Now, not that there's anything wrong with scap pull-ups, but A, you can't spend a lot of time doing them, like in the position, learning how this feels, which is what I want you to do here. And B, you know, like if you're a 250-pound powerlifter or whatever, scap pull-up's a pretty freaking hard thing to do, right? Especially if we're going to spend a lot of time there feeling things around. So in my opinion, this is a much better or easier, more approachable version, right? So you need a cable machine set at a high level, and you need a strap kind of like this. one that you can put your arms in. Now, you probably could get by with like a straight bar that you feed under your arms. Probably isn't going to work so well. If you don't have a strap like this, there's probably a really cool website out there somewhere run by really cool people that sell stuff like this, so maybe go check them out. But what we're going to do here is play around with how stable our shoulders feel, right? So what we're going to do is I'm going to sit down because why not? And we're going to hook the strap over the arms, kind of get it into the armpit, okay? There isn't really a graceful way to do this, so don't try and find it. Get it as high up on your arms as possible. So right, from this position, if we wanted to, we could just train that kind of reverse shrugging motion, right? So we've got the cable pulling the shoulders up. From that position, we depress, right? So this might just be a good place to start for some people, right? So when you're setting up your bench press or any pressing movement, you should be taking the shoulders and pulling them down, okay? It doesn't matter whether we're here, there, or wherever. We can probably all agree on that. But what we're going to do is go to that depressed position where you are trying to make the neck as long as possible. Like, yes, you should have a neck when you bench press, and get the collarbones nice and wide, okay? Now, in this position, what you can do is play around and feel serratus and lat doing their job. So what I mean is when I'm in this kind of neutral position here, I can feel both working because they are. The shoulder joint is kind of aligned evenly over them both. The lat can do its job pulling back there. The serratus can do its job pulling there. Now, if I were to go protraction and now I reverse shrug, all of that goes straight onto my serratus. So I can feel that's working very intensely now. And how do I know that? Because when serratus does its job properly, if I try to arch like I would on a bench press, I can't physically arch my sternum up because the serratus on the front side of the body is pulling down so hard that I've lost that ability, right? Now I go back to neutral, and let's say we go down and back as far as I can get. So I'm here. So now I depress and stay back in retraction. Now my lat is working overtime. So all of this work is being done by my lat pretty much now. Now that the load is back there, if I want to, I can arch my chest up, absolutely no problem, okay? Which I know what you're thinking right now. So that's where I want to be when I bench, right? Because I want to arch up here. Not necessarily, because as we discussed, if I'm back here and down, my lat is already locked up right now. Like, it's doing a lot of work. It doesn't really have a lot of, should we say, brain space or whatever to do something else, like control the bar on the way down. We can kind of test this, right? So I'm here, I'm gonna put my arms out like I'm bench pressing. I'm gonna go back into maximal retraction and depression. So here, if my arms were on this imaginary bar from here, pulling that in, it's very, very unstable, right? It feels like the shoulders don't really have any room. Like I can't really pull my elbows back any further than that. Now, if that's all my range of motion is on a bench, then wonderful, right? But very few of us, that's going to be the case. Now, if I were to go full protraction, pull down, lots of stress on serratus straight away. And now as I'm bringing the bar down, I can just feel my pecs doing loads of work, which probably isn't a good thing on the way down, right? It's the eccentric phase. We want the back doing the work there. But what I can do is I can go from here, so imaginary bar, protraction and down, lots of serratus, lots of pec. Maximal retraction, lots of lat, but feels kind of unstable. I can find this wide position here where I can pull down. Now, I can feel both working. So there's a bit of lat, bit of serratus, and I can glide here very easily. So my shoulders have room to come back and together like they want to, or will naturally want to during the eccentric phase of a bench press. But my lats aren't locked up like they are when I'm back here. Like when I'm back here, because my lats are already locked up, I can't really use them to pull the arms down, and I would basically be using the load to passively push me down into the bench, right? Which is probably not a position we want to be in if we want to be as stable as possible, okay? So just set this up and have a play with it. Go to depression, get your neck as long as you can, and then from there, see how it feels here, see how it feels there, and then see how it feels in the middle. And most people are going to feel best in terms of stable and able to move, because remember, it's no good feeling super stable if you can't control any movement, in their widest possible position, which is going to be for me about here, or very slightly retracted, I'm sorry. Just enough so that there's still some room that as that bar comes down on the bench press eccentric phase, there's room for the shoulders to come back in together, and therefore the sternum can come up to meet the bar. So Noah and I are going to do a drill now where hopefully you can feel this working in real time, and it's going to be like a transition between feeling that on the cable machine and feeling it on your bench press. Now, when we get the shoulders in that maximally depressed position, what we want to feel is the lats taking the load that we're holding externally. So like, you very often hear like give the weight to your lats and stuff like that, right? That's definitely on the right track. But we can't do that unless the shoulders are first fully depressed, because basically what happens is the lats pull the shoulder down, and then once there's no room left to pull down anymore, then they can actually start creating tension and torque on the arm. It's like you can't begin a pull-up if you're already shrugged up. What will happen is they'll go down and down and down and down and down, and then when there is no more down to be had, then the arm starts moving. And it's the same thing on your bench press. If you want to feel the lats take the load from the start, there has to be no more room for the shoulders to get down, and then the lats will take over of the load and take the load off the arm, right? Which is when you'll start feeling it kind of down here in your lower lats. So this is a way that you can do that for time without having a weight hanging over your head. Okay, so we've got a flat wall, which believe it or not, there's not many of here in the gym, okay, because there's bars everywhere. So this was one of few. I'm going to get here and set up kind of like I'm doing my bench press. Noah is going to be my external load. Noah's great because he's strong and he can just push and push and push forever if he wants to, right? Whereas like I'm going to tire if I'm like all arched up and holding an external load. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my hands out as if I just unracked a bench press, and Noah's going to put his hands on my fists and he's going to apply some pressure. Give me like 20%. So there, so I can see straight away that if I'm up here, that feels really not great and it's super unstable, right? So give me a tiny bit more. So like that, I can kind of feel that like goes straight into my shoulder joint. So from there, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take Noah's force and I'm going to depress my shoulders as much as I can. So I'm going to relax my traps, which is a big part of this, and go down to that position now where my shoulders can't get any lower. Okay, so we're there. Now Noah can push a bit more, and that goes basically straight down into my lats. Okay, relax. So we need to be here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go maximal retraction, like some of us will be doing when we bench, right? So Noah, set up again, get into a split stance, and now I'm maximally retracted. Give me a push. Right, so that straight away I can feel it in my bicep. It's not particularly stable. Give me a little bit more. Okay, so like that, he's going to win this fight reasonably soon if he gave me any more. Now, if I go from this retracted position to neutral, there straight away I can hold him there, and that's like 20-30% less effort. So by being in this neutral wide position, I have the ability now to hold him much more stably and much less pressure on here. Now you can ramp up and test that theory a little bit more, right? So we're going to do the same thing, but I'm going to go down as if I were like halfway down in my bench press. Okay, so I'm going to be here. Let's say elbows about 90 degrees, come a little bit closer. There we go. So I'm going to start off in a terrible position that none of us would agree that we should be in, right? So I'm going to go way up here. Noah's going to give me some, and he's going to go on, keep pushing. Like I can't stop him there. Like he's going to win that fight, and also that just feels awful, right? So now we're going to go maximally retracted. So way back here, and I'm going to go to my midpoint. Go ahead. And so maximal retraction, go ahead and push. Harder. Go on. And he can win, right? Which says more about me than him, perhaps, right? So what we're going to do the test again, but now elbows bent, and instead of in that maximally retracted position where I can't really yield and can't really give into my lats very well, I'm going to be neutral. So let's try this. So relax the traps, shoulders drop down, elbows to about 90 degrees, give or take. This isn't pure science here. Go ahead. So now I'm neutral. So the collarbones are wide. I'm maximally depressed, and go. Try to win. See, in that position, he can't win. And if I want to, I can push him away. And the reason for that is now, because I'm maximally depressed and wide, the lats have a bit of play, and they're able to take his force and funnel it down. And I can, when I'm wide and down here, there, when he pushes, I can feel that go straight down there. Whereas when I'm really retracted, kind of gets jammed up in my shoulder and upper back here. And obviously when I'm way up here, it just all feels in my AC joint and nothing good there, okay? So that is one way that you can kind of just feel for where does whatever external force is coming into me, where does it feel the least stressful and where am I the most stable? And like I said, for most people, that's going to be down and wide or very slightly retracted, probably not pinned back like that. Okay, so this is a continuation of that last drill, just making it even more bench press specific now, okay? So the idea is to recreate that solid, stable feeling we got over there, but on the bench press. And really what this comes down to is kind of learning to yield to the weight. You know, the equipped benchers figured this out incredibly well a long time ago, right? Like you'll hear cues like, you know, give it to the shirt, let yourself sink into the bench, give it to your... What we're really talking about here is we need to relax the traps to allow the shoulders to depress. And we also need to relax the pecs and the front delts, you know, the muscles that we want to be driving on the way up so that we can give the muscles to give the force to the muscles that are supposed to be doing the work on the way down. In this context, we're primarily going to focus on the lats, okay? So it's kind of like learning to set your shoulders in a way so that you can actually relax into it, as opposed to holding it up here, right? Holding it in your pecs and your triceps, because any work that they're doing on the way down is actually pushing the bar away from you. You don't want to be doing the eccentric phase by pressing up into the bar just enough that it doesn't drop down and kill you. The goal is to give it to the muscles responsible for the eccentric phase and turn it into a row. And that's basically all of what this is really talking about here, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set up for a bench press, and Noah is gonna once again be my external resistance, and he's just gonna go there and he's gonna press down. And I'm gonna see how I feel based on how I set up my shoulders. And what you're looking for, when you do this well, and your partner will be able to tell you better than you might feel it, is when you get the shoulders in the right position and relax the traps, relax the pecs, etc., you create a system where the force of the bar flows straight through you into the bench. So like your partner who's doing the pushing will basically just feel the bench through your body. Whereas if you're holding it there or jammed back here and it's all in your upper back, they'll be able to feel that as well. So like sometimes they're going to be a better judge of how well you're doing this more than you are. Okay, so let's see what happens. This may go horribly wrong, in which case it'll be an even better video. So I'm just going to roughly set up here and take the bar out. So what I'm going to do to start, I'm going to be massively protracted, right? And shrugged up. So like we all know we'd never press here, right? So I'm going to lock my arms. Noah's going to go ahead and press down on the bar for me. So like that is all up in my shoulders. Once again, that feels pretty unpleasant. Like push a little bit harder. Like, yeah, that's straight in my shoulder joint, in my neck, and like very, very unstable there. Okay, so relax. So what I'm going to do now is, my goal is to try and feel this empty bar in my lats. So from this position, I'm going to relax my traps and roll the shoulders down, keeping them wide until I feel my lower lats kind of pinch. It's almost like I can feel the weight down in my hip near my QL. Now from that position, just for argument's sake, I'm going to maximally retract. So make my arms super short. Like, Noah, if you may, give me some. Right, so that now is maximal retraction and depression. It feels okay, but give me a little bit more. I feel like I couldn't really fight him here. So like push a bit harder. He's gonna start winning there pretty soon. Okay, let's relax. So let's go and find the middle ground. So now I'm gonna relax the traps. I can feel it kind of like catch on the bottom of my lats, but this time, rather than going full retraction, I'm going to go wide collarbones. So I can feel my serratus, I can feel my lat, and we're there. So Noah, if you please. and give me some. So in this position now, go. When he pushes down, I can feel him in both my serratus and my lat. Just constantly push, please, no. And in that position there, nothing feels overly taxed here. Like every bit he pushes down extra, I can feel it in my lat, but I'm not really feeling anything in my pecs, not really feeling anything in my shoulders or my front delts. And I can kind of just hang out. Like I don't really even have to grip the bar because it's going straight down into the bench and relax for me. Noah had the wonderful idea of filming this angle, and I'm very glad he did, because it reminded me that I need to talk about how this whole shoulder serratus thing plays directly into this, right? We can probably all agree once again that generally speaking, good things don't really happen out here when it comes to bench pressing. And we spend so much time worrying about tucking in to fight this, when a lot of the time what we don't realize is this elbow flare is coming from the shoulders being elevated, right? Because what happens then is the lats lose leverage, and when the lats lose leverage over the shoulder and the upper arm, they can't tuck that upper arm in and keep it where we want it. So basically imagine you're coming down on your bench and say your shoulders shrug up like this, which is common. The lats lose leverage and then they stop rotating the upper arm in, and then you flare out. And then as you press, obviously we experience that drifting back of the bar and the elbows flaring out too fast. And we'll kind of see that now, hopefully from this angle when I do this. So we do a very similar thing to what we just did. I'm gonna unrack it. So first off, if I go up into elevation, we can see how the elbows point further out to the side, right? Whereas now, if we do what I talked about, where we depress the shoulder blades and keep the collarbones long, and we keep depressing down, down, you can watch what happens to the upper arms as part of it. Now, if I were to bend my elbow, look what direction they're pointing in. They're already pointing down towards my feet, right? I haven't actively thought about doing anything up top here. So again, if let's say I were to go halfway down here, and now I elevate, where do the arms go? They go out. So if that same thing were to happen during your concentric phase, think about where the elbows are gonna go, flare right there. Whereas if I'm here, and now I depress the shoulders, lengthen the neck, just from that mechanism alone, now the elbows end up in. So they'll stay most of the time on their own. They will stay down in here where we want them, providing this stays down and long and we don't end up top like that. So all of this, what we're talking about, the reason, and yet another reason that's important is because that brings all of this here into external rotation, and it when the lats can behave as we want, then your upper arm is almost on like a fixed track. And if the shoulders stay down as we push, they'll also stay in where we want them. But if we come down and we go into elevation, straight away the elbows wing, and then we experience all of that, and the extra shoulder pressure, the lack of pecs out of the bottom, and all that horrible thing. So that's yet another reason why this is important. So do it. And that's essentially what we're looking for when we get all of this set correctly. We create the system where the load can be shared by the serratus and the lat. And when we have that external load pushing down on us, it gets very evenly distributed. So nothing feels overly stressed, nothing feels overly tight. And then the goal then obviously would be to keep that alignment whilst we go through our press. So that drill that we did earlier on the cable, really good for that. You can just literally put your arms out, grab like a dowel or something if you want, practice keeping pulled down, and just go through your imaginary bench press like that. And feel what you need to do to maintain that depressed wide shoulder position as the arm goes through that range of motion. But that one there with the bar, your partner pushing down, probably a very good one to do when you're warming up, or maybe even on your warm-up section if you've got a plate or plate and a half, whatever. Bring out the rack, partner pushes down. And what happens when you do this well, they're gonna feel nothing springing back towards them because you're not pushing up anymore, you're yielding down to it. So you unrack it, they push, and when they feel that the bar has kind of yielded and now all their force is going straight down into the bench, they can give you the green light to go. Whereas if they're feeling you pressing up into them, then you know that you've still got tension in the wrong place. So Hopefully that helps your bench press, your overhead press, your dips, your push-ups, whatever, feel a little bit more stable, a bit nicer on your shoulders, and hopefully in the long term, that's going to lead to happier shoulders and stronger presses. As always, thank you for supporting Elite FTS, and we'll see you next time.